Chapter 1, believe it or not, was actually the last design and shirt that we made. And originally, going into exploring the concept of Memento Mori, we wanted to make the collection actually be a collection. First collection was a story, a linear story. And the second collection, we just wanted to make pieces that illustrated the concept. And then the more we got into it, the more we realized our default setting is narrative.
Yeah.
And we just end up creating something that shows a progression or a linear story. And so with chapter 1 being our last one that we made, that's when we realized this is still a story. And the narrative in the chapter is actually the origin of death. And do you remember making it? Like, when do you remember making just chapter 1?
Yeah, so the big back painting on the design was one that you had found, I feel like, probably one of the first days we were going through archives.
Yeah.
Memento Mori-esque paintings. And I remember both of us just kept coming back to it as being something we would love to use. And up until that point, since it was the last one made, it hadn't fit quite right. It just wasn't what we were looking at. And I remember you pulled it up and just dropped it on the bag. I don't even remember why. But you had it and you did it and you just sat back and were like, oh shoot, I really like this.
Yeah, right.
And I remember sitting there and all of a sudden it was like the lights all dinged at the same time because it all of a sudden had a place. The artist Evelyn de Morgan, who painted that particular design, had used everything she painted had a lot of symbolism behind it, and so there's just like the tones are like magenta and green, and they're just like slapped onto each other. Overall, the tone is very red. There's wings on the creature, and they're not white wings. It is such a perfect illustration of humanity and temptation, and we were just like, it's the genesis of sin right there.
Yeah, right. And that's where we had started to then just say this is a linear narrative, and
That's the space.
yeah, and when we had made that one, we're like, okay, this one is definitely the origin of sin and the origin of death. And seeing the painting on the back with the serpent interacting with the winged being or the winged angel, we're like, this is very much an illustration of the serpent tempting Adam and Eve. While that's not necessarily Adam and Eve or like those two beings, on the front of the shirt and the pockets, the pocket paintings, we have Adam and Eve eating of the fruit, and then underneath it we have Jesus being tempted by Satan in the wilderness. And we just wanted to take these two instances in human history, and it's like you have the origin of death and the origin of sin, the origin of temptation, and you have Jesus, who was the one who came to save us, to conquer death, and
It's the origin of redemption.
right, and it's just like he was tempted the same exact way that Adam and Eve were tempted, only he overcame it, and he withstood the temptation and ended up having the devil flee from him. And so I just felt like those were two, again, another element of Saint and Sinner, showing we failed and he was victorious in that conquering of death. And so when you look at just all the elements of that chapter 1 t-shirt, there's a lot of just origin and, like what you were saying, genesis of death, and that's why we wanted to put it as chapter 1 in exploring the concept of Memento Mori.
It's kind of interesting in looking at it in hindsight too, because not only was that a painting that we really liked and kept coming back to, a couple of elements in the sketch design on the opposite pocket from the painted stacks were elements that we had messed around. We had a whole design just with a hourglass, and we looked at a million different Grim Reapers. Lots of clocks, and so it was really funny that when we sat down and had like laid all that out, I'm like, what sketch is it? And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, I know. And we pulled together like 3 of your favorite elements, and stayed up till 3 drawing
Yeah,
it.
right.
But it's a cool thing to have that. Yes, it starts at the beginning, and it also happens to have on it things that began our thoughts, things that began for us as explorations into Memento Mori and how to visually represent it. And it was fun to have that kind of just be like, it's the beginning for if you're looking through it, but for us it also was the beginning of a lot of our thoughts. And so even though it was created last, it still had a lot of first thoughts into it.
Yeah, for sure.
Which is cool when you sit back and think about it.
Yeah, the thing about the sketched elements on every t-shirt is going way back to just conceptualizing Memento Mori and then trying to figure out a design aesthetic for the collection. I kept coming back to finished works or finished paintings merged with things that were sketched. I remember sending you a shirt, I think it was a Dolce & Gabbana shirt, and it had a big heart, and then it had like this sketched angel over it. And I was just like, I don't know why that fits, but it fits. And I just kept thinking of it from the perspective of elements that were finished and elements that were unfinished, or something that looked unfinished merged with something that was finished. And I think that was just another way of me trying to sift through what Saint and Sinner is. It's just like Saint is something that is glorified and is perfected, and the sinner's still got work to do type of thing. So I wanted to merge those two things. And then what we ended up looking at was, I think it was a Gustave Doré imprint. And it was the angel, and the angel was actually outlined to make it look like it was an angel, to make it look divine.
But it wasn't filled. It wasn't finished.
Yeah.
The rest of his drawing was relatively finished.
And so I looked at that and was just like, it looks like he's trying to show the two different dimensions. Like he has like he has like the spiritual dimension or the spiritual realm merged with the earthly physical realm. And I was just like, maybe we should kind of copy Gustave Doré and take inspiration from that and create these sketched outline elements and merge them with all of our pieces. And so that's what we started doing, because I had pitched it to Joe and I was just like, I can't really draw. So I'm like, what do you think about it? Like, can you make these to an extent where they're still outlined, but they're still like, this could still sit as its own piece.
Right.
So I remember pitching that to you, and I only had like one like super thick outline. I'm like, just make it look better.
Yeah. And it was another part of our conversation that had circled around Memento Mori as a concept was also that because we don't look at our own ends and our own inevitable just cessation of life, we also stop and don't really give any thought to a spiritual realm and to why that would give us significance or be significant for us. And so it was also a place in pulling refined paintings that already existed to try and pull it and add just texture, yes, but also a way of being like, here's the completed thing, here's the thing we see every day with our eyes, but there's something outside of what we already see. And what we see humanly isn't always refined, it's not always perfected. And so this was another way to kind of bring that in.
Yeah, and the elements in general, the ones that are sketched, some of them as you go throughout the collection, the sketched elements actually interact with the finished pieces, and on other ones, they just kind of stand alone. And especially with the one in the first chapter, that's 3 different paintings. No, I think it's three different elements that we pulled. One of them is Gustave Doré in the Grim Reaper, and then it's the clock. I think there's something else in there too. But we merged them all together because I was like...
The clockface, it was also like the astrological clock.
Yes.
Like it was a combination of clocks, like time.
Yeah, so I had found this other piece that was not in the public domain because it was made like 30 years ago. And I'm like, I want to make something like this. And so I just grabbed a bunch of things, made a really rough compilation of it, and then Joe just outlined and sketched it and made it look more uniform and unified. Chapter 1 as a whole piece is not just an origin piece or the intro chapter or chapter 1. It's very much a foreshadow into what the collection is going to turn into, because with the addition of Jesus being tempted by Satan as one of the pocket paintings, that's foreshadowing what's going to happen in chapters 2, 3, and 4. And that's why we wanted to incorporate those two, not just to show the battle of humanity and divinity and us against God, but also at the same time foreshadow what's going to happen, where God is going to send his son Jesus, and he's going to come into the world to unify us with his kingdom again. And that's why we wanted to add that in there too, of just having the gospel message still present even at Earth's shattering moment of being separated from God.